Welcome to the Professor's discussion for Chapter 3, Human Resources Strategy and Analysis. This chapter explains how we design and develop a human resources system that supports the company's strategic goals. We're going to review the strategic management process from Management 1010 and then how to develop a strategic plan. We're also going to discuss the Human Resources Department's role in the process of strategy execution and formulation. And finally, we will explain why metrics are essential for identifying and creating high-performance human resources policies and practices. I rarely do this, but I'd like to start with an example from your textbook. At the beginning of the chapter, you'll see an example about the managers at the Ritz-Carlton. They conducted strategic planning and decided that in order to compete, they'd have to step up their customer service game. In order to make a lasting change, they would have to formulate the new HR management policies and practices around hiring, training, and rewarding employees. The practices that would need to produce behaviors then in order to achieve that goal are the HR practices that we would be focusing on. Remember from Management 1010 that goal setting and planning is a process. It's one of the 4 functions of management. We set objectives and implement a plan. Plans in organizations appear at multiple levels, starting with a higher level or strategic goal. Strategic planning is important because in a well-run organization, the goals come from the top of the organization downward. The process forms a hierarchy of goals, and these goals in turn should guide everyone in the organization in what they do. Remember that the strategic plan is how we match our strengths and weaknesses with the external opportunities and threats in order to identify and act upon a competitive advantage. A strategic plan is the company's plan for how it will match its internal strengths and weaknesses with external opportunities and threats. A successful strategic plan helps ensure a competitive advantage. The 7 steps in the strategic planning process allow you to manage this in a systematic manner. Steps 1 through 6 are actually a review of Management 1010, which is to define the current business and mission statement, perform an internal and external review, formulate a new direction, formulate strategies to achieve that goal, and then where we come in HR is where we start to implement that strategy. We want to make sure that in steps 6 and 7, we implement the strategies and evaluate the performance. And those are actually the 2 steps that you see right here that we are involved with from a human resources perspective. Steps 1 through 5, we've actually already learned in Management 1010 class. Also, as a review from 1010, you'll remember that there are 3 types of strategies. Managers form these 3 types of strategies, starting with the corporate-wide strategic or at the corporate level. The corporate level strategy identifies the portfolio of businesses that make up the company and the ways in which the businesses are related to each other. The corporate strategy question is, how many and in what kinds of businesses should we be in? And if you recall, we can concentrate, diversify, or integrate in some sort of vertical or horizontal fashion. Managers endeavor to achieve competitive advantages for each of their businesses. And competitive advantages at the orange level that you see here enable a company to differentiate its product or service from those of its competitors. Differentiation based on its uniqueness or cost leadership allows a company to increase its market share. Third, functional strategies identify the basic course of action that each department will pursue in order to help the business attain its competitive goals. Human capital is one of the best competitive advantages because it's hard to duplicate the unique combination of a company's personnel. So, from a human resources perspective, as a line manager, the corporate and competitive strategies that come from higher levels of management are reinforced by us line managers. We have valuable knowledge about that competition, about suppliers, and about the industry in order to help out. We are responsible for developing and carrying out that blue level or functional level strategy. We've seen that once a company decides how it will compete, it turns to formulating functional department strategies to support its competitive aims. One of those departments is human resources. Its functional strategies are human resources management strategies. Therefore, strategic HR management is about formulating and executing human resources policies and practices that produce the behaviors needed to achieve strategic goals. Management forms a strategic plan and measurable strategic goals or aims. The plans imply certain workforce requirements in order to achieve the firm's strategic goals. Given these workforce requirements, HR managers formulate strategies. These policies and practices help produce the desired workforce skills, competencies, and behaviors that the company needs in order to achieve the strategy that they've set forth. How do we keep track of this? The strategy map shows there are three ways, and the first is the strategy map. The strategy map shows the big picture of how each department's performance contributes to achieving the company's overall strategy. Many employers quantify and computerize the map's activities. The HR scorecard is in fact not necessarily a scorecard, but it's a process for assigning financial and non-financial goals or measurements, to important HR management related chain of activities. That chain is required in order to achieve the company's strategic aims and monitor results. The digital dashboard presents the manager with desktop graphics and charts. It's a computerized picture of feedback of where the company stands on all of the metrics they've identified from a human resources perspective. I've mentioned the word metrics so far. Being able to measure what you're doing is a really important part of the HR strategy process. First, management translates its strategic plan into workforce requirements. Those requirements are tracked in terms of measurable worker competencies and behaviors, such as outstanding service. And given these workforce requirements, the human resources manager then formulates supportive HR strategies, policies, and practices, such as hiring, training, and performance feedback programs. Finally, then, the HR manager picks the measurements or metrics by which to gauge whether or not the new policies are producing the required competencies and behaviors. Not only can we do that, we can actually compare the practices of high-performing companies to our own through the process of benchmarking. We can do this in order to understand what it is that high-performing company does that makes them better. This is shown on figure 3.9 on page 67. Benchmarking is only part of the process. HR can also use other metrics to determine how they are helping the organization reach its goals. Many companies are using workforce analytics to analyze and track HR data to help improve performance and increase job satisfaction. Because of the technological advances in data mining, we can conduct a statistical analysis to find new or hidden relationships among different variables. An example of this is tracking when and who is more likely to buy a certain product. HR audits are the way for an organization to measure current policies and practices. We can then identify areas where improvements can be made based on the company's goals. Evidence-based human resources is the use of this data and facts to support related proposals, decisions, practices, and conclusions. To do so requires managers to be more scientific in making decisions. This scientific approach requires objectivity, experimentation, quantification, and prediction. Why should a manager bother to be scientific? Well, for managers, the key point of being scientific is to make better decisions. Two things here are important. First, in gathering evidence, managers need to be objective. Being scientific also requires experimentation. An experiment is a test that the manager sets up in such a way as to ensure that he or she understands the reasons for the results obtained. The question to be answered is, what is the evidence and what does it suggest? A high-performance work system is a set of HR policies and practices that together produce superior employee performance. These policies and practices illustrate the importance of HR metrics and how they help to assess performance. They reveal what HR systems must do in order for employees to be successful. Such success may include helping workers to aspire to manage themselves. HR practices might also highlight measurable differences between HR systems in high and low performing companies. To improve that performance, we need to design practices to produce superior employee performance. One theme throughout our class will be to answer the question, how can we increase employee engagement? Employee engagement, by definition, is the connection to the job and the commitment to get it done. Engaged employees are connected, committed, and productive. And this is a very important concept in human resources management. Engagement is what drives productivity and performance. Organizations that register a higher level of engagement also register a higher level of performance. That means that sales, quality, productivity, safety, turnover, absenteeism, and revenue all move in the right direction. All of these areas register better statistics due to employees being more engaged. And also, the workforce is less likely to be unionized. The problem is that today only 30% of employees consider themselves to be engaged. A full 70% of the workforce is either not engaged, which means checked out, or actively disengaged, which is even worse because they are undermining the strategy and the behaviors that are going on in the organization. It's our job to improve employee engagement. But how? Well, there are several strategies that can help improve engagement. First of all, we need to provide supportive supervision. This means generally we need to be a positive force, and it can go a long way to making sure that employees understand both the department's role in the organization's success and as well as how the employee's effort contributes to that success. Finally, we need to help employees get a sense of accomplishment from their work. We'll spend a good part of the remainder of the semester tying all of the various concepts back to employee engagement.